and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah, and today I am taking you to one of my favorite destinations that I've ever been, and that is the Faroe Islands. Faroe Islands were dramatic and beautiful, relatively untouched, and kind of newer to tourism, it felt like. And so, I don't know, I just loved every aspect of it, including the days when I could do nothing because there were storms, which I will get to. But yeah, if you are considering a trip to the Faroe Islands, I cannot encourage it enough. Let's get right into how to go about planning a trip to the Faroe Islands and just some pointers that maybe you can use for planning your own trip. Okay, so just a little bit about the Faroe Islands. They are actually a part of Denmark, but they do have their own language and their own culture. They kind of sit on the map above Great Britain and between Iceland and Norway. Like most of Europe, they spoke English really well. They're not necessarily going to go out of their way and talk to you, but if you speak to them, they were always super kind, super helpful, and just easy to communicate with. Their tourism definitely felt newer to me, and I've been into tourist offices in New Zealand, Iceland, and booked kind of on the spot, but they don't really do it for you in that way. They just send you to the website. Then the other thing that made me realize it was kind of a newer tourism is nobody's really jumped on the Northern Lights bandwagon. I'm sure there's going to be some young entrepreneur who maybe already has realized that there's nobody doing kind of like Northern Lights tours. It definitely feels newer, and for me, that just added to the charm. Like I don't know, I just loved it. I loved that feeling. But in terms of planning your trip, just be prepared that you could really just book everything on the website before you go. Yeah, there's just not as traditional of a tourist office as I've experienced in other countries. I don't know, it added to the charm, but it also made certain moments kind of interesting. The best way to get to the Faroe Islands is going to be, at least the last that I had checked, you can fly from Reykjavik, Iceland, you can fly from Edinburgh, Scotland, and then you can fly from Copenhagen, Denmark. Now, since the Faroe Islands are part of Denmark, Copenhagen to the Faroe Islands was the cheapest. Copenhagen actually ended up being the cheapest for me from where I live. So I went to Copenhagen. I hadn't been to Copenhagen or Edinburgh yet, and so Copenhagen was an amazing stop, which I will do a video on another time. Of course, if you decide you want to do Iceland, also a great country. Iceland's beautiful. I have been there too, and it is totally a worthy experience. And then from Reykjavik, you could fly over to the Faroe Islands for how many ever days you want. So there are cruise ships, I believe, that stop in the Faroe Islands. I'm not really a cruiser. I do, though, want to do an Antarctica cruise one day. Absolutely. And there are cruises here and there that I would be interested in. So if you're a cruiser, that is an option. All right, so the best time to visit the Faroe Islands is the same as pretty much all of Europe, and that is the summer months. The weather there is, in my opinion, just cold year round, but that's coming from Florida. That's being born on a tropical island. That to me is just cold. Like when I went end of September, I was prepared for winter. I over-prepared, and actually I was never cold, which bonus. It's just not a warm destination. So when I say summer, I don't mean like it's gonna be warm. I just mean summer is their high season. Also in the summer, I think the puffins are around, but the Faroe Islands do stay pretty mild year-round in the sense that the temperature does not have like drastic fluctuations. And so even if you went in the winter, it wouldn't be like sub-0 degrees because the ocean does keep it more temperate, even though it's very far north. When I was there end of September, out of the 6 full days that we had, we flew in on a Saturday, flew out a Saturday, so we had 6 full days. Out of those 6 full days, we had two winter storms. Like, 2 winter storms that basically prevented us from doing anything. I mean, it was such a bummer. It was such a bummer. There was one hike that I really wanted to do, and both days that like I had originally planned it for the Monday, and I mean like it was like ice rain and like the craziest winds. It felt like low-key a tropical storm, but more constant. It felt like this constant barrage of gusty winds, and then it was icy rain on top of it, and it was wild. It was wild, but I am not one to give up easily, so I got us in the car and I was like, we're gonna go to the tourist office and see what's happening. And sure enough, the ferries were canceled and we couldn't go over to Kalsoy to do that hike. So if you go in the summer, I think you're less likely to experience that during your trip. It is going to be a lot more people in the Faroe Islands. However, they only have so many places that you can stay, which does kind of put a cap on the amount of tourists that can be there. So I don't really know how crazy it might feel in those months. Generally, I try to avoid the high season, but in the case of the Faroe Islands, it might be best to go there during their high season. All right, so I think the best way to get around the Faroe Islands is just to rent a car. This is definitely not budget friendly. However, nothing about the Faroe Islands, I'm gonna be honest, is really budget friendly. So this is definitely one of those bucket list, save up and enjoy kind of trips. I think the best way is just to rent a car. I will say that the roads are in amazing, amazing condition. Like, they're fantastic and they're large, American size. Like, I never felt claustrophobic. There are a lot of islands connected through underground tunnels, which is very cool. And even those tunnels did not feel claustrophobic. They had multiple lanes and overall it was just a great experience. There are roundabouts. I love a roundabout, but I know sometimes Americans don't like roundabouts, but y'all need to get on the bandwagon because roundabouts are awesome. Overall, I think driving is very easy. There was one moment with driving, which was actually a 1-lane tunnel through a mountain. And this was on like the far island. We followed these cars in and the light had turned just as we got in. And the cars in front of us sped so fast. Like, before I knew it, they were gone and it was just this dark tunnel. That was really the only scary time. And then there was like a 1-lane road going out to Saxon area. And I really am sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of these words, but the 1-lane road out to Saxon area was open. It wasn't in a tunnel or anything. And we did have a point where a car was coming in our direction, but there's little areas where you can kind of pull over. Overall, the roads are in immaculate condition and it's very easy to get around on your own. So I definitely recommend just getting a car and driving. For the islands that are not connected by underground or underwater tunnels, you can book a ferry or you can book a helicopter ride. Now, a point about the helicopters, because when I first heard about them, I heard they were subsidized by the government and they're actually pretty cheap to fly from island to island. Yeah, so I got very excited about the helicopters. However, there are some rules for tourists, which honestly I very much appreciate, because if I was a local and it was tourists that were constantly taking my opportunities to get around, I would not be happy. So tourists can only book a week in advance. That's point one. Tourists can only go one way on the helicopter. They cannot do round trip. So I looked into like taking a helicopter to an island and then ferrying back, but again, because you can only book a week in advance, there was just a lot of moving parts. I didn't end up really giving it a try. Yeah, because obviously you're gonna take off in a helicopter in a different area than you would come back in the ferry. So you've kind of just got to figure out and organize it, and it just didn't end up working out. And in hindsight, we ended up with winter storms and never ever got onto a ferry, which I had planned for 2 days to be on a ferry and visit outer islands, and winter storms happened. So yeah, I do recommend having a plan when you go to the Faroe Islands, but also keeping it open-handed and just knowing that the weather happens and you just got to be prepared. So definitely, if you're going to book tours, book them towards the beginning of your trip just in case they end up being rescheduled. Okay, so while you're here, what do you see and what do you do? Basically, this country is just all about its sort of natural, untouched, stunning, dramatic landscapes. And so you're just gonna wanna be outside admiring it as much as possible. I booked 2 different boat tours for the trip that my friend and I took, and one was to see the kind of famous sea stacks, which I know I mispronounce this, so I'm not going to say it. I'll put it on the screen. Then we did another one for the Vestmanna Cliffs, which was also absolutely beautiful. I would definitely recommend at least 1 or 2 boat tours, because seeing the landscape just from a different vantage point, it's just so beautiful. And then if you're into fishing, they have so many different kinds of fishing tours. There's a bunch of hiking, and not all the hiking is going to be crazy hard. Some of it is, some of it isn't. We did more of the easy to moderate hikes, and they still deliver on just beauty. They absolutely deliver. It's so beautiful. There is one hike that I was so disappointed that I did not get to do, and it was on Kalsoy. It was going to require a ferry, and the Monday that I had wanted to do it, the winter storm rolled in, and we just couldn't do it. So that was a bummer, but it just looks so incredibly beautiful. And that, I think, would have probably been the hardest hike of all of the hikes that we did. Lake over Ocean, that hike, it's relatively easy, but very beautiful as well. So definitely do that hike. Definitely do your research depending on which hikes you want to do, to know kind of what it's going to cost and if you need a guide. One thing that I didn't get to do that I think would be amazing is dinner with the locals. Northern Lights. Okay, here's the thing about the Northern Lights. Before I went, I did so much research. I thought, like, I could maybe see it, because there's so many blogs that say you can see the Northern Lights from the Faroe Islands, and it's true, you can. However, I did all this research thinking like maybe we could see it, then doing the research realizing, okay, maybe it's not so realistic for the time that we're there. So I pull up to the rental car check-in station, and the employee of this rental car agency pulls out his phone, and he shows me the most magnificent photos of the Northern Lights from the week before. We were mere days from seeing the Northern Lights. I definitely think some young entrepreneurs should get involved, but if there is no tour offered, do your research, figure out like how you can track the Northern Lights on your own, because you might actually get to see them. Okay, so what do you pack for the Faroe Islands? Now, normally I would not even spend time on this, but for this particular destination, I definitely think it's worth mentioning. All right, the first thing that you definitely need to pack for the Faroe Islands are hiking boots. Like, you just need them. Even on the easy to moderate hikes, you need the hiking boots. And here's a little story of why I think these are so important. Now, on the Monday that we were supposed to go to that lighthouse, we were gonna ferry to Kalsoy. We woke up, icy rain, winds like crazy. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but let's go. I'm one to push through. So I was like, let's go to the tourist center and just see what's up. Maybe the storm will pass. Maybe they're still running. Maybe they're used to it. Maybe it's not as bad as we think it is. So we pull up to this. I mean, guys, the wind was crazy. And I mean, I've been through hurricanes. Like, for the hurricanes, I don't go outside. Obviously, I stay inside, which is what we ended up having to do. Spoiler. But yeah, I mean, the winds were crazy. It was wild. So anyways, we did find out in the tourist center, they call them winter storms, even though it was end of September. Yeah, we go in here. I'm asking the tourist center girl. She was super nice. She did confirm to me that the ferries were canceled, which was such a bummer. And I stood there asking more and more questions because I just wanted it to not be true. So she said that just that summer, like just the months before we got there, I think it was about 17, it was somewhere between 15 and 20 people broke a bone on that hike. Like, they broke a bone. And she said the main reason was improper footwear. Make sure you pack them hiking boots. The temperatures stay fairly mild, but the wind and the rain are just the wild cards, and you just never know. If you do plan to do any hiking, you need to have proper shoes. Like, don't be pulling up in your Adidas Sambas. Those are for indoor soccer, not for hiking. My next point is, besides the hiking boots, make sure you have a waterproof or at least a water resistant jacket, coat. I think you're talking 30s to 50s. Like, that's where you are. year round. So the temperature is not really the thing to be concerned about. Yes, you're going to prepare for the temperature, but the wild cards are wind and rain. Like, that's what you got to really be prepared for. You can go out on a hike and you're fine for the temperature, but then if rain and wind start rolling in and you don't have anything waterproof, you're in trouble. And with that, you want to do waterproof or at least water resistant pants. I think I ended up doing water resistant and I was fine. But if you're going on longer hikes, you might want to be more prepared with waterproof versus water resistant. Glove, scarf, beanie, again, that was perfect for me because that to me is a winter day, but for you, you might not need it depending on what time of year you're going. So yeah, just pack according to how you feel like you'll need for the temperature, but definitely don't forget, I'm gonna say it again, the wind and the rain. Another thing to take is a dry bag. So I had read about this tip and I bought a dry bag, and I don't know why I didn't buy one sooner because I use it all the time now with paddleboarding and different things. So yeah, I ended up getting a dry bag for this trip to keep like my camera, phone, and different things like that dry in case of any rain. I definitely think it's worth investing in, and it can be used honestly for so many different activities. So it's a good investment just to have. You could pack a swimsuit if you wanted to do hot springs or swimming in the pool. We took one. That is basically what you need to pack for the Faroe Islands. I don't know if you caught it, but wind and rain, those are the wild cards. All right, well, I hope this video was helpful if you are planning a trip to the Faroe Islands. I will share about my personal week in the Faroe Islands in another video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. Until next time, happy travels. Bye. Quick, just in case, though, okay. Famous sea stacks, the cliff, I don't know.